Has this ever happened to you? A man once drawn to you like a moth to sacred fire, who looked at you as if the stars had found a home in your eyes. Suddenly cold, distant, distracted, the warmth evaporates. You feel it in the silence between messages, in the way his gaze begins to look through you instead of into you. And then, before you've even had the chance to process the shift, he's with someone else, smiling in her pictures, laughing in her stories, vanishing from yours. This isn't just heartbreak, it's a psychic rupture. Because in that loss, it's not just him you grieve. It's the mirror he once held up to you, the one where you saw yourself as adored, magnetic, irreplaceable. But what if I told you that his fading interest was never truly about you? That the soul of the feminine, when misunderstood by the masculine, often becomes too much, too fast, too real for men who have yet to face their own shadows? You see, attraction is not merely about beauty or charm. It is the dance between two unconscious psyches. His anima, your animus, each projecting, reflecting, responding in a silent storm of emotional energy. When a man first falls for you, he isn't just falling for you. He's falling for the archetype you awaken in him. Maybe it was the nurturer, the muse, the mystery. But as time stretches on, the projection collapses. The mirror cracks. Suddenly he sees the real you. And if he has not done the work within himself, the rawness of your truth threatens his ego. And so he runs. He seeks another, not necessarily because she is better, but because she is safer, easier, less confronting, less illuminating. In truth, when a man leaves a woman of depth for another, it is often a flight from the parts of himself he fears the most. And you are left to interpret this as a flaw in your worth, as if your sacred power were somehow not enough. But you are not here to be enough for a man too afraid to meet your fire. You are here to remember who you are, before his gaze defined you. But if you still long for him, not out of need, but because you sense an unfinished pull, a karmic loop still open, then the path back is not in chasing, convincing, or begging. It is in embodying, becoming. The woman who reclaims a man's attention is never the one who pleads from a wounded place. It is the woman who disappears, not physically but psychically, who slips from his emotional grasp, not with words, but with energy. She is the woman who begins to see herself through her own eyes instead of his. In Jungian terms, she individuates. She withdraws the projections. She ceases to view him as the sun and herself as orbit. She remembers, she is the source, the solar feminine, radiant without needing to burn for anyone's gaze. This is not a game. This is not seduction as manipulation. This is alchemy, the slow burn of transmuting pain into power. The moment you stop trying to reattract him, and instead turn inward, into the vast caverns of your psyche, into the forgotten parts of yourself you abandoned to be palatable, to be pleasing. That is the moment he begins to feel you again. Not through texts, not through presence, but through the energetic vacuum your detachment creates. Men, especially those governed by an unintegrated anima, are magnetized to mystery. And mystery is born not from playing hard to get, but from being ungraspable in spirit, from being so rooted in your own becoming that he can no longer place you in the same frame where he once took you for granted. And yes, even if he is with someone else, especially if he is with someone else, your silence echoes louder than your words, because he expects noise, drama, desperation. But when none comes, when you vanish into your own transformation, something inside him begins to unravel. He begins to remember the way your presence made him feel seen, unnervingly so. The way you challenged his illusions, not out of spite, but because your essence was too wild to fit his projections. He remembers not the fights or flaws, but the depth. And if the woman he is with now cannot mirror that same depth, if she exists only in the light of ease without the gravity of truth, he will begin to feel it, the ache, the hollow. But you will not be waiting, because the woman who walks this path, the one of psychological rebirth, of emotional sovereignty, does not sit in the ashes hoping to be rescued. She builds an altar there. She meets her shadow. She dances with her fears. She becomes the kind of woman who doesn't just attract a man back, but makes him question how he ever let her go. And it is this energy, not strategy, not performance, not manipulation, that calls him forth. But let us now enter the underworld, the domain beneath appearances, where the unconscious breathes, and the soul of a woman whispers truths she has long silenced, because beneath the ache of loss, beneath the chaos of confusion, lives a deeper wound, abandonment, not merely by him, but by yourself. For when a man pulls away, when he chooses another, when he becomes emotionally absent, he is not just rejecting you, he is mirroring the part of you that has not yet fully chosen yourself. And this is the great initiation. This is the realm where the ego fractures so the self can rise. Jung called it the individuation process. But for the feminine, it begins with heartbreak more often than not. Because heartbreak cracks open the illusion that love is something you must earn, beg for, or maintain with constant performance. He lost interest because he was never prepared to face the full force of your truth. He tasted the sacred waters and mistook their depth for danger. And when he turned away, what he truly feared was the confrontation with himself that loving you demanded. Yet the feminine wound runs deeper. Many women, especially those who have been taught to be pleasing, agreeable, accommodating, carry a psychic script. If I am good enough, he will stay. If I am beautiful enough, calm enough, giving enough, he will return. But this is the lie, the trap, the spell passed from mother to daughter in generations of emotional starvation. The truth? He will only return when you return, fully, fiercely, to your center. Reattraction does not come through chasing or convincing. It comes when a woman reclaims her archetypal essence. Not the mask, but the marrow. When she walks through her grief without collapsing into it. When she stares at the mirror of abandonment and says, I am still here. This is not about winning a man back. It's about shedding the identities that believed you had to be someone else for love. It's about becoming the kind of woman who commands attention not through noise, but through silence that trembles with presence. Understand this, he may be with someone else, but unless that woman touches his soul the way you did, unless she too reflects his deepest fears and unmet longings, her presence will not erase his memory of you. A man forgets many things, but he never forgets the woman who held up the mirror of his becoming. He may not have had the strength to walk through that mirror, but its image haunts him in quiet moments, late at night, after a fight, in the silences between distractions. But none of that is your work anymore. Your work now is transformation. Not to become better for him, but to become whole for you. Because the feminine psyche, when abandoned, can either spiral into obsession or rise into sovereignty. The choice is yours. Will you become the woman who waits, or the woman who remembers? And in that remembering, you must retrieve all the parts of yourself you gave away. The wildness you softened, the anger you swallowed, the needs you minimized, the truths you silenced just to be chosen. Gather them, hold them, let them roar back into you. Because the woman who rises from loss with her fullness intact becomes a storm of grace and gravity. She stops asking, how do I get him back? And begins asking, what parts of myself did I abandon just to keep him? That's the turning point, the rebirth. And here something profound begins to shift. Because in your detachment, not the bitter kind, but the sacred kind, you become unpredictable again. You become unknown. No longer the woman crying by the phone, but the woman laughing with friends. The woman who writes, dances, travels, dreams again. The woman who is so deeply embedded in her own life that he can feel the absence of her former longing like a ghost in his chest. And this, ironically, is the exact frequency that stirs him. Because now he cannot place you. He cannot predict your reaction, your thoughts, your next move. You have become mystery again. Not through pretending, but through healing. Not through strategy, but through soul. So if he reaches out again, tentative, curious, nostalgic, it will not be because you followed him into the shadows, but because you lit your own torch and walked ahead. And perhaps he will come, Perhaps not, but by then, you will no longer be the woman who needed him to choose her to feel worthy. You will have become the woman who chooses herself first, and from that place, decides whether he is worthy of returning at all. Somewhere in the silence that follows a man's exit, a woman begins to hear herself again. At first, it is faint, a whisper beneath the chaos of longing, the static of overthinking. But it's there, a quiet voice, ancient and unwavering, saying, "You were never meant to beg for what was already yours by birthright." The woman begins to shift, not because she is trying to manipulate fate, but because she is finally remembering the one relationship that predates all others, the one with herself. The one she betrayed each time she silenced her instincts to stay agreeable. Each time she twisted herself into softness for a man who feared her full expression. Each time she overgave just to feel secure. But now she starts to see. It is in this vision that the old paradigm begins to crack. The belief that you must win him back, that you must earn his attention, fix what went wrong, or prove your worth to his eyes, all of it begins to die. Because these are not the actions of a sovereign woman. They are the echoes of the wounded feminine, the child archetype playing at love, hoping her good behavior will be rewarded. This is where shadow work begins. The woman who dares to go inward now faces herself, not as victim, not as seductress, but as the wounded healer. She asks, "Why did I need his attention to feel whole? Why did I feel discarded when he looked elsewhere? Why did his presence become a measure of my value?" And here she meets the abandoned girl within, the part of her that equated emotional rejection with unworthiness, the part that mistook his leaving as confirmation that she was somehow too much or not enough. These wounds do not go away by pretending they aren't there. They dissolve only when they are met with radical honesty and mothered by your own strength. So if you want to reattract him, not just in body, but in soul, you must first call back every projection you cast onto him. Stop seeing him as the prize. See him clearly, a man, flawed, afraid, running from truths he was not yet ready to face. Not a god, not a savior, just a mirror. Because here is what few tell you. Men feel energetic, detachment before they ever read a message or hear a word. They feel it in their bones. When you truly withdraw your psychic investment, when you stop holding the emotional field open for him, he senses the loss. And this is where the polarity begins to reverse. Now he is the one drawn toward the void. Not because you crafted a strategy, but because you ceased to orbit his sun. You became your own center of gravity. And nothing disorients a man more than the sudden disappearance of a woman who once fed his ego with her devotion. But the woman you are becoming does not detach to provoke him. She detaches to liberate herself. This is what separates her from the wounded manipulator. She does not play with silence. She embodies it. She does not punish with distance. She becomes distance. Not cold but sacred. Not angry but whole. She no longer sends late-night texts. She no longer wonders what the other woman has that she doesn't. She no longer stalks stories for breadcrumbs of hope. Her eyes are turned inward now, toward her healing, toward her rebirth. And still, he feels it. In the places he once found comfort, he now finds absence. In the energy field where she once awaited him, there is only stillness. He may not understand it logically, but his body remembers her, the scent of her spirit, the weight of her gaze, the way her silence once demanded truth. He begins to question, to doubt, to miss. But by now her longing has transformed. No longer is she the woman pacing in emotional purgatory. She is fire wrapped in stillness. She is not waiting. She is choosing. And if he returns, he will not find the same woman he left. He will not find the open arms of approval. He will meet a woman who has sat with her shadows and learned to love herself there. A woman who no longer clings, but knows. Knows her worth. Knows her power. Knows that his return is not the miracle. It is merely a reflection of the miracle she became in his absence. Because to reattract him is not to chase, but to withdraw from the chase altogether. To become so deeply, unapologetically you, that he realizes the version of himself that left was blind to your value. And now, the question is no longer, how do I make him want me again? But rather, does the woman I am becoming even desire the man he still is? He does not recognize her now. Not fully. Not easily. Where once stood the woman who twisted her light to fit the contours of his neglect, now moves a force uncontained, calm, luminous, untouchable. She no longer vibrates in response to his absence. She no longer lives in waiting, because she has crossed the threshold, from maiden to queen, from ache to awareness, from scarcity to sacredness. And this is what shakes him, not just the loss of her presence, but the loss of the version of himself who felt powerful in her longing. He begins to feel the dissonance. The comfort he once found in the arms of another begins to thin like smoke, because nothing real can compete with the energy of a woman who has seen herself and returned. The woman who has done the inner work becomes psychologically unlocatable. She is no longer shaped by male approval. She is no longer a surface for projection. And to a man who once depended on her softness to soothe his inadequacies, this is unbearable and magnetic simultaneously. You see, when a man leaves, he often believes he's walking towards something better. But in truth, he's walking away from the sacred initiation your love offered him, the chance to evolve, to confront his shadows, to grow through discomfort. Most men do not want growth when it comes in the form of a woman's depth. They want reflection without distortion. They want affection without confrontation. They want passion without pressure. But the feminine in her evolved state cannot stay small to soothe a man's fear. She cannot dull her voice to maintain the illusion of harmony. She cannot stay quiet just to keep his attention. She burns for truth, or she burns away. And when she chooses herself, fully, without compromise, the world around her begins to rearrange. Suddenly, men who once dismissed her feel a tug in their chest when they hear her name. Suddenly he starts watching, from afar, uncertain of how to approach the fire he once tried to contain. But you are no longer playing a role in his drama. You have stepped off his stage and written your own script. You wear your solitude like silk. You speak without shrinking. You feel desire, yes, but it no longer consumes you. Your worth is no longer tied to how tightly someone holds you, but to how deeply you hold yourself. And this, above all, is the irony of reattraction. It is not born of performance, but of release. The moment you stop grasping, you become the one who is grasped for. The moment you stop proving, you become the one who must be proven to. He may start sending signals, subtle at first, liking a photo, commenting something benign, asking mutual friends about you, testing the waters without diving. Because deep down, he knows, the woman you are now will not be reached with breadcrumbs. She will not be swayed by nostalgia. She will not open the door to a man who left it swinging behind him. And if he is still with someone else, that bond begins to tremble. Not necessarily from you, but from himself, because he senses the lie. The ease he chased begins to feel shallow. The peace he thought he'd find becomes hollow. And he remembers the woman who met him at the level of soul, not just comfort. But it is no longer about him. You've crossed into new terrain now. You've touched the part of you that is eternal. The feminine not as fragile, but as fierce. The woman who no longer fears being left, because she no longer abandons herself. The feminine wound, so ancient, so deep, is not healed by being chosen. It is healed by choosing yourself, again and again, even when your heart trembles. Especially then, because the woman who can hold her own. Grief becomes the woman who holds her own power. And so you rise, not to lure him back, but to become the kind of woman a man must rise to meet. You no longer entertain emotional immaturity masked as romantic confusion. You no longer decode mixed signals. You no longer dim your brilliance to preserve a connection not meant to hold it. You are no longer waiting to be reattracted to. You have become the attraction. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are now. The healed feminine is not desperate. She is not loud. She is not reactive. She is inevitable. There is a silence that follows transformation. A silence not of emptiness, but of presence. The kind of silence that hums with power, like the earth after a storm. And this is where she stands now. Not as a woman who has won him back, but as one who no longer needs to. Because the need has dissolved. The ache has transmuted. What once felt like desperation now lives as discernment. She no longer aches for the return of the man. She stands in reverence for the return of herself. And still, he feels her. Not the old version of her, the one who waited, who bent, who clung, but this new iteration. The woman forged through fire, the one who can walk away even while still loving, the one who can miss him yet not chase. Because this woman does not seek closure from him. She has given it to herself, written it in her own blood, sealed it in her bones. This is the paradox of energetic reattraction. The moment you detach completely, the field reopens. Not because you whispered his name in the dark, not because you tried harder, but because you finally stopped trying at all. You became the ungraspable feminine, not cold, not distant, but self-contained. And it is this self-containment that awakens something ancient in the masculine, the pursuit instinct. Because the masculine seeks that which is free, that which is not reliant, that which reflects his own unresolved depth. But beware, this is where many falter. When he reappears, tentative, remorseful, intrigued, it can be tempting to collapse into old patterns, to believe that his return is the reward for your pain, to interpret his reaching out as a sign that your worth has finally been confirmed. Do not fall for this illusion, because the woman you have become is not here to be rewarded. She is not here to be chosen like a prize. She is here to choose. And so when he comes back, you do not melt. You do not rush. You observe. You ask, has he evolved? Has he earned the right to stand in this new field I've created? Or is he merely nostalgic for the power I once gave away too freely? Because the feminine in her shadow form clings, but the feminine in her light tests. She does not test from bitterness, but from clarity. She is not hard to get. She is hard to fool. She listens not just to his words, but to the vibration behind them. Is he different, or is he just lonely? Is he present, or is he just curious? And most importantly, do I even want him anymore? Because here lies the final secret. The woman who embarks on this inner pilgrimage rarely ends up wanting the same man who triggered it. Not because he is beneath her, but because she has outgrown the version of herself that once needed him. What she seeks now is not attention, but resonance. Not validation, but truth. And if he cannot meet her in that depth, then she blesses his path and lets him walk it alone. She does not return to prove a point. She does not engage to relive the fantasy. She allows what is real to reveal itself. Slowly, cleanly, clearly. Because the sovereign woman does not just attract a man, she evokes his transformation. And if he cannot rise, she does not lower herself. She lets him go, not as loss, but as liberation. By now, he may feel haunted by her energy. Not the haunting of regret, but of recognition. Because he knows, on some primal level, that he stood at the gates of something holy and walked away. And whether he comes back fully or not is no longer the question. The question is whether you still want what he represents. Because here, in the stillness of your reclamation, you feel it, a new attraction forming. Not from the past, but from the future version of you. The version that doesn't just want a man, but requires one who is emotionally sovereign, psychologically awake, spiritually aware. And until that man appears, she does not wait. She becomes the muse, the priestess, the queen. She becomes the woman who does not just stir the hearts of men, but who awakens the gods in them. And this energy, this depth, this dignity, is what no man forgets. Even if he never says a word, even if he never returns, even if he watches her from a distance until the day he dies, because the woman who chooses herself becomes unforgettable. Now she walks differently, not with arrogance, but with gravity. Each step tethered not to his gaze, but to the earth beneath her, rooted, embodied, no longer floating in the air, of his potential, no longer aching for crumbs of what once felt like a feast. She has fed herself now, not with distractions or rebound love, but with the richness of self-acceptance and the nourishment of shadow integration. She has faced the ghosts, the buried grief, the old dreams where his arms still felt like home. She has cried not for him, but for the parts of herself she abandoned to be loved by him. And through that grief, she has birthed herself anew. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation. Not perfection. Not becoming palatable, but becoming whole. Integrating the fragments. Making peace with both light and dark. No longer hiding the hunger. No longer concealing the fire. And in doing so, she no longer seduces from her wounds. She attracts from her wholeness. There is power in this wholeness. A quiet power. The kind that makes people look twice, though they don't know why. The kind that shifts energy in a room before she even speaks. Because it is not in her body or her beauty that this power lives. It is in her presence, in the way she no longer tries to be anything. She simply is. And now, the man who once left begins to feel it, slowly, subtly, but undeniably. The energetic bond they once shared starts to call to him. Not through her effort, but through her absence. Through the vacuum created when a woman who once overgave now gives to herself. He may feel it in the quiet between conversations. In the dullness of a new connection that lacks soul. In the sudden recollection of her laughter, her gaze, the way she could read him without words. And if he is ready, truly ready, he may reach for her again. Not just from desire, but from reverence. But she is no longer an open door. She is a threshold. A man must now cross himself to reach her. He must face his shadows, own his fears, acknowledge the ways he fled her depth, because he could not yet face his own. And if he cannot, if he clings to comfort or mediocrity, then she does not collapse into disappointment. She blesses and releases. Because her peace is no longer for sale. She does not punish him. She does not speak his name with venom. She simply lets him go with the grace of a woman who understands this sacred truth. Not every man is meant to rise with you, and still she remains open, not to him specifically, but to love, to truth, to the sacred union that mirrors back her growth, her vision, her frequency. She knows that the masculine in its true form is not afraid of her power. It is drawn to it. Not intimidated by her clarity, it is awakened by it. The man who can meet her here is not seduced by performance. He is entranced by her being. He does not try to tame her wildness. He protects it. He does not try to fix her softness. He worships it. He does not run from her pain. He meets it with presence. Because he has done the work too. He has walked through his own shadows. He has alchemized his own wounds. He no longer seeks a mother or a mirror. He seeks a partner. And until he appears, she remains unmoved. Not closed, not bitter, but sovereign. She pours her love into her art, her friendships, her joy. She becomes her own sanctuary. And from this place, love finds her. Not because she chases it, but because she embodies it. So, if he comes back now, she does not ask, "Why did you leave?" She asks, "Who are you now?" Because the woman who reclaims herself does not fear reunion, but she no longer sacrifices her soul for it. She allows only what aligns, what resonates, what rises. And if he can't meet her there, then he becomes a beautiful part of her past, a chapter that broke her open so she could finally write her own story. And she thanks him, not for staying but for leaving, because in his absence she found everything. And now at last, we arrive at the summit of her journey, not the return of the man, not the echo of his desire, but the return of herself. There is no longer tension in her spine when she thinks of him. No flinch in the chest when his name appears in conversation. No fantasy loops replaying what might have been. What once was a wound is now a scar, a sacred mark not of ruin but of resurrection, because the woman who has walked the path of self-reclamation no longer moves from desperation, but from devotion. Devotion to her truth, her intuition, her standards, her soul. And in that devotion, she reclaims what was never his to hold in the first place, her worth. There is a sacred solitude here, but it is not loneliness. It is expanse, like a quiet mountaintop after the climb, where the only sound is wind, and the only weight is peace. She no longer waits for a man to fill the space beside her. She sits in her own throne, not as a queen waiting to be crowned, but as one who crowned herself. If he comes now, if any man comes, he must come whole, not flawless but aware, not perfect but present, because the woman she has Become will not open her gates for the boy who once ran from her depth. He may knock, he may plead, but unless he has shed the armor of ego and clothed himself in consciousness, she will feel it instantly, and she will not answer, because she no longer needs to be needed. She no longer calls love that costs her peace a home. She does not take the bait of potential. She waits for the one who is ready to meet her. Not in fantasy, but in fire. Not to fix her, but to build with her. And this is where the feminine becomes untouchable. Not by walls, but by witnessing. She has seen herself naked in the mirror of loss. She has held her own heart through the dark night of abandonment. She has mothered the girl who once begged to be chosen. And she has emerged not as a reaction, but as a revolution. And so, to you, the woman still wondering if he will return, if he will realize, if he will awaken, understand this. You do not need him to. His awakening is not your responsibility. His absence is not your failure. His distraction is not a measure of your beauty, your intelligence, your value. It is a mirror of his own distance from himself. And when a woman begins to truly understand this, something miraculous happens. She stops orbiting around love and becomes the center of it. She no longer searches for completion in another. She begins to attract not from hunger but from overflow. And men feel it. The world feels it. Not because she is louder now, or sharper, or more guarded, but because she is clear. And clarity is rare. It is irresistible. It is what shakes men awake in the quiet of night, years later, as they wonder why no one has ever made them feel like her again. But she does not live for their wonder. She lives for herself now, for the art she creates, the friendships she deepens, the work that stirs her soul, the love she gives without losing, the truth she speaks without flinching, the boundaries she sets without guilt, the mirror she holds up not for approval but for alignment. And if he, or any man, is to return to her life, it will not be as the center of her universe. It will be as a witness, as a mirror, as a partner in growth, nothing less. Because the woman who has seen her own soul no longer dances for breadcrumbs. She builds her own table. She eats alone in peace if necessary, because she knows she is the feast, and so let him return, or let him drift. It no longer matters, because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. If this message stirred something deep within you, if you felt seen, heard, or awakened, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel for more soul-shaking truths, psychological insight, and the raw, empowered feminine wisdom you won't find anywhere else. Comment below, share your story, your pain, your rising. Every word you write is a mirror for another woman finding her strength. Share this with someone who needs to remember who the hell she is, because we rise together, and your voice matters here.